I walked into my stylist, and I know that he had been on Ozempic since September, I think. And each time I'd gone back, he looked better. I walked in this time and I said, wow. I said, you look great. I said, so what are you doing? And he said, I'm never going off of it. Right now it's a crutch.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Wendy Myers. Welcome to the Myers Detox Podcast. And I've got a great show today with Debra Atkinson, and we're going to be talking about exercising after 40, all the lies that women have been told about exercise during menopause. And we're going to be touching on ways to increase bone density, issues with osteoporosis if you don't do weight-bearing exercise. We'll talk about some of the realities of exercising after menopause, or what happens to your body with your hormones, etc., after menopause, and what you can do to remedy that. We talk about using peptides for increasing muscle strength and flexibility. We talk about Ozempic and other peptides that people are using for weight loss, and what are some of the realities of those, the pluses and minuses. So it's a very, very interesting conversation. Tune in to the end to listen to our talk on Ozempic. And what we talk about, a lot of really, really interesting subjects when it comes to this. Must listen if you are anyone who's not exercising right now, or you want to increase longevity, give you a lot of tips and tricks on doing that well into the menopausal years. So check that out. Debra Atkinson, she is a hormone-balancing exercise coach and a 40-year fitness expert. She's helped over 275,000 women flip their second half with vitality and energy that they want. She's a best-selling author of You Still Got It, Girl, the After 50 Fitness Formula for Women, Navigating Fitness After 50, and Hot Not Bothered. And Debra hosts the Flipping 50 TV and the Flipping 50 show. And She Means Fitness Business podcast with more than 3.5 million downloads. She's a prior senior lecturer in kinesiology and a subject matter expert recognized by the American Council on Exercise, AARP, Washington Post, Prevention Magazine, and USA Today, just to name a few. Check out her TED Talk titled Everything Women in Menopause Learn About Exercise May Be a Lie. I've been on her show before, Flipping 50. I highly, highly recommend her podcast, and check out her website, flipping50.com. Debra, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, hey, thanks to have me. I mean, we had this in the green room. I have to tell everybody, just look at your face. You glow. I'm hoping some of that rubs off on me through Zoom.
Yes. Well, thank you. We were talking because I do a lot of, energy work and bioenergetics. And, that's really, I feel like, my secret weapon. A lot of stuff to reduce stress. And it's a lot of work. It's been many decades in the research to figure all that out.
That comment is so worthwhile to anybody who's listening and came over here from my audience, my community. We're so used to thinking hard work is like, you got to be breathing hard, you got to be lifting hard. And honestly, that tangible stuff is actually easier than doing the real underlying work on yourself. Sometimes I think we try to ignore, that and be a little more noisy with the doing and the action. And getting quiet is really hard for us.
Yeah, I'm definitely, as I'm getting older, I want to do more surrendering and relaxing.
Yeah.
So that's like what can I do that's easiest and the path of least resistance?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you don't deal with it, at some point it catches up with you, and you will. So you can either choose it or you can do it because you have to.
Yes. And, for me, exercise has been a lifelong pursuit and passion and interest, and I try to make it as enjoyable as possible and try to do it as much as possible, even though I don't always take the time. But I wanted to talk about that. I haven't done a lot of podcasts on exercise, but it's incredibly important. So it's incredibly important for anti-aging and longevity. And so let's just kind of maybe frame that. Like, why do we need to exercise? A lot of people just think of it as like weight loss, or they don't want their butt to droop, or they just want a toned butt, and they're not really thinking about much else. Like, why do we actually need to exercise?
Well, first of all, you just told me your age because you just said one body part drooping. Like it's a race to the socks, girlfriend, at some point. So, you know, I think this year, 2024, is when we're recording live. This will live on and it's relevant no matter what. But I feel like longevity is the buzzword of the year. Like everybody's using that word. And it's so funny because never ever, this is my 40th year in fitness. And I don't care if you're 20 or you're 87. My mother demonstrated to me that it's immediate gratification that we want, and so I find it really interesting that people are more interested in longevity, and I'm grateful for it. I even find, we're hearing about 30-somethings who are trying to biohack so they could be younger. I'm like, how far back do you want to go?
Just stop already. Yeah.
But I think there's also no discounting that we want the 2-for-1. We want to look good, feel good now. And we're a little more conscious, I think, as we get older, even more so of, am I doing the right thing for the foundation? Because now we're in this pattern where we're seeing, gosh, I wish I would have known that earlier in my life. I wish I would have known to start that back then. And I think we're at least able to project. So, number one, if we lose muscle, we've lost, period. End of sentence. And it's not just about strength and energy and stamina. I mean, that's a given, but it's about our independence. In order to do the things that support our bone density, we have to have the muscle. So it's almost, that's your first layer of how do I get it? But it's also disease prevention, and a lot of, there's this do I, don't I, do HRT right now, and we can get into that too. But muscle, if you don't want to do something extraneous, you don't want to supplement with hormones, muscle acts like an endocrine organ. And it's on your side, it's natural, and it's as easy as picking up something heavy in your house. And they don't even have to be in the shape of dumbbells because your muscles do not know, right? It doesn't have to be at a gym. But muscle is just such everything for the immediate gratification out there that everybody wants. If there's been a little weight gain, a little creep or belly fat deposit that wasn't there. So even women who don't gain weight in perimenopause, the lucky ones, they often have a redistribution. It's sitting somewhere on their body it didn't used to sit. And, that's not just a vanity thing. That's a health risk thing. So if you've gained weight around your waist, we've got to watch that girth. And if you're a smaller woman, I also don't think you can wait until it's 35 or more inches where it becomes a real health risk. If you're a smaller, petite woman, we've got to look at your overall shape too and say, it's not going in the right direction. But muscle can help with that. More muscle means you're moving more all day. Your energy expenditure is greater doing anything you're doing. And it's also great for all things that improve your strength in your muscle are great for brain health. And we're all going to want those cells sooner or later, right?
Yeah, I saw one podcast that was talking about how your muscles actually regulate your neurotransmitters. Like the more muscle you have, the more movement. It's really plays a huge role in regulating your mood and your serotonin and dopamine.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so that everybody understands, and if you're overly stressed at midlife, because we tend to be, as estrogen comes down, even if you're doing replacement, you're not as high potentially as you were pre-menopause in your reproductive years. But when estrogen comes down, the body turns this switch and says, okay, cortisol's going up. And some of the causes of our cortisol we can't get rid of. We can't shoot the messenger. If it's your family, your dog, your, aging parents, they're not going away. We can't take care of all of it, but we can offset it because if we've got better mood, those neurotransmitters you mentioned, we've got serotonin, we've got dopamine, or we've got oxytocin. If they're up, cortisol can't also be. So that's your secret weapon, is working on the mood, boosting it. And that brain chemistry happens within seconds of you starting to move your body. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing how much better you feel after you exercise. Even
Hmm.
I find it interesting when I feel low energy. When I go exercise, I have an amazing energy boost afterwards.
Hmm.
It's just very counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And it continues to surprise me, even though I've been exercising my whole life. It just, I don't know why, it just continues to surprise me. And and there's another really interesting fact that I was listening to Steve Kotler talk about how your longevity is very directly correlated or indirectly correlated to your thigh strength,
Yeah.
as your quad strength determines your balance, your
Hmm.
stability. One third of fatalities are from older people is them falling
Falling.
or
Yeah.
balance. But
Yeah.
you,
And
yeah,
you're getting up out of a chair, right? Safely. And we all do it. I think a lot of older adults say, I don't know if I want to exercise because I'm afraid of hurting my knees or, and it's like totally understand that nobody does want to get hurt. And there is fear that gets in the way of some people doing the exercise that will actually help them. But generally, your knees probably are going to suffer more if you're not exercising than if you are. We need that strength in order to help us operate. But longevity is directly correlated to total body strength as well. So, and total body strength is correlated to, you can take a hand grip test, and the way to get stronger or do better at that test is not ideally walking around squeezing tennis balls. It's, doing things that you're lifting heavy for the major muscle groups. And we're just able to test you with a grip strength as opposed to taking you into gym and doing a very unsafe 1 rep max. I mean, we wouldn't want to do that with most of us because it could be risky, but we can tell the correlation between your overall total body strength and your grip strength. And that is a correlate with your longevity. So the longer you live or want to, and the better, right? We want the health span, we want the energy, we want to and not be the person stuck in a nursing home.
So for anyone listening that really wants to detox their body, go to heavymetalsquiz.com. I created a quiz for you. It only takes a couple of seconds. Based on some lifestyle questions, you can get your toxicity score and get a free video series that answers all of your frequently asked questions about how to detox your body. Check it out, heavymetalsquiz.com. Yeah, and it's easy to fall into that kind of that counterintuitive thinking where you don't want to work out because you might injure yourself.
Right. Right.
But being tight and weak is
Mhm.
what ends up causing you to be injured. I know when I've
Mhm.
had periods like I just did this heavy docu-series and I couldn't work out
Mhm.
for like 3 months. It was really intense. And so I got back to working out and I realized how tight and how weak and tight I was. And
Mhm.
that's what can lead to an injury. So I've had to be very
Mhm.
ginger getting back into it. But I understand that fear of not wanting to hurt your back and then
Mhm.
losing mobility. But you can do stuff like Pilates or yoga or you kind of like more gentle things getting back into a workout routine.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that. And I think this brings up a question that just for decades and still prevails. I think a lot of people fear if I start lifting weights, I'll get tighter. I'll lose range of motion. And, I think back in the 70s or 80s when we saw all those muscle heads whose, their arms are out here, they can't put them down their sides. Potentially they're the only ones who lost range of motion. But by going through full range of motion, doing exercises, we're doing a couple of things. We're what I call juicing the joints. So we get that lubrication in the joint. So movement feels better. You've got the right muscles surrounding joints strong. So movement, again, feels better with more ease and you're less likely to lose range of motion if you're going through the full range of motion. Not to discount that, yes, we do want stretching and or yoga or Pilates, however that might show up for you in a way that's enjoyable for you. We want it all. And you're not going to harm that by doing strength training. If anything, it'll improve.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of lifting weights. I've been lifting weights since I was 13 years old. I had my little weight set, my little routine that I was doing
Really?
them. Yes, and it's interesting. The hardest that I worked out in my life, my muscles were the smallest. It just killing myself working out with the personal trainers and stuff like that. My body was the smallest, so you're not going to get these huge bulky muscles that some women like worry about.
Well, and let's speak into that too, because if you're a woman definitely over 50 or 60 and you started lifting weights at one point in your life and you got bulky, I want you to go back in time to where we also might have been. Because for many of us, that is an era where SnackWells was all the rage. We were eating really high carb, low fat. We thought that was evil, and because you could have low fat, we didn't have a serving. We had half the box, so you were kind of loading in a way that would have caused a bulk building protocol. But also, I want you to go way back. If you first learned to lift in high school, and you're of the era I was, what did we learn? 3 times 10. And friends, that's a bulk building protocol, right? So lifting heavier, doing fewer repetitions, or doing more repetitions with lighter weight, both of those tend to be, not so bulk building, but you also don't have the same hormones you had then. So you might try really hard to bulk up and not be able to do it. It's going to take a lot of extra effort, and bulk building right now might be the thing you need so that you're avoiding frailty 10 years down the road.
Yeah, that's just not going to be me. It's just not, I saw, I'm just seeing friends and family members and things, people fall and hurt themselves, break a bone, walking and just tripping and breaking a kneecap. And, and that's one of the reasons I lift weights is like, I am going to be strong. My bones are going to be strong. I'm going to do weight bearing exercise. I am not going to get osteoporosis. And I'm thinking that every time I'm lifting weights. And I love it. I enjoy it. But one thing I found after I hit menopause, I'm 51 now, and I hit menopause at 40, 47, 48. And, your estrogen goes down a lot. And I started having a lot of musculoskeletal issues. I was pulling muscles all the time. I'd go for a walk and pull a muscle in my butt. And I was like, what in the hell is this? I can't go for a walk now? Like, what is going on? And I was pulling muscle. I pulled a neck muscle 4 months. It was bothering me. I re-injured every time I would lift weights. So I thought, okay, I've got to figure this out. But I realized low estrogen,
connective tissue,
can be responsible for these musculoskeletal issues. But at first, I tried peptides, I tried BPC 157, and instantly solved my issues. But now I have started some estrogen. Realizing that I need that estrogen to keep those muscles kind of supple, prevent muscle tears and things like that. And then I started doing the testosterone because I was killing myself on the gym and not building muscle. And I'm like, I'm doing all this work. And so I decided to supplement testosterone, and just because I want to get results. I don't want to feel like I'm wasting my time. So I've definitely gone that route. I never thought that I would. I always told myself, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to age naturally. Like, no, wait until you hit menopause and talk to me.
And I love that you said that. So a lot of women, and this is in our community at Flipping 50, a lot of women are still having this discussion. I think beginning to see that some of the studies that came out have been retracted, and yet the problem is once they've been out for a long time, they still live up here. It's really hard to separate that and take it away and not have that little bit of fear that this is a bad thing or it's a crutch and it's not natural. But I think that a lot of women also think, I don't have symptoms. Being very limited to like the hot flashes and the night sweats types of symptoms, and so thinking I shouldn't take them. And you mentioned, one of the signs that you're lower, and it's very obvious you're lower in those hormones, are you're doing all the work, but you're not seeing any results. You're, it's not just you're tired all the time necessarily. It's just I deserve it. Like, I'm managing my diet and I'm getting protein and I'm getting the rest. I'm doing the exercise, but I'm not seeing the results. That's a sign that you may benefit. the exercise has greater efficacy when you're supplementing with hormones. And that's not a persuasive argument for anyone, but just another point of view that you might want to think about. We've got thousands of women in the community, and we've seen it. Women will get results no matter what. But those who are on hormone replacement therapy and they've dialed in that cocktail so it's right for them seem to get better results, or they come just a little bit faster.
Yeah, just as someone who's worked out their whole lives, I know what results I get. I know when I go to the gym, what I feel like, what my muscles feel like, how long it lasts, et cetera. I've got it down. But, after I hit menopause, I just started noticing, I had, if I put this effort in my 20s, it'd have been a lot different results. And I just felt frustrated, but also felt like physically, I can't do what I was doing in my 20s. Like I can't do 2 hours in the gym, or a day or whatever exercise I was doing. I don't want to push my body that hard, but I still want to look good. So what am I going to do? So I decided to do the hormones and the peptides and just try it, but it's not the right choice for everybody. But yeah, if you exercise, you're going to get some results. You are, period.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And if nothing else, back to mood, right? Which is such a big one for a lot of women going through menopause who feel like things are a little bit flat, and they don't get the lift that they used to. So let me ask you this. So I'm going to play interviewer now. So there is a study out there that talks about having fewer dopamine receptors during menopause or due to menopause. And I think it hits a lot of women differently. If you have been somebody who exercises, you're used to going and getting this little bit of euphoria. It feels so great. But a lot of women are experiencing like they're flat. Like it didn't really give me that little boost of feel good anymore. And, it's not that they're not working hard enough. It's potentially due to fewer dopamine receptors. Do you want to comment on that?
I can definitely say that I feel the same way. Like I don't feel that same excitement, maybe that same high, maybe that I used to when I used to go to the gym. But yeah, I could definitely identify that with. I'm thinking like just in general, you can even have, like your cortisol receptors can be desensitized, if you're constantly pushing your body with the stress, lack of sleep, and just your insulin receptors get desensitized when your body is flooded with sugar and it's not being burned off or what have you. I think you can have a lot of similar issues with all of your hormones if they're, maybe not balanced. You even get with peptides, you can get desensitized to those and have to get off of them for a little while. It's, like the HGH secretagogue hormones, you can become desensitized to those and have to go off of them. For instance.
And do you find cycling those like periods of time on purpose? So in strength training, we call it periodization. Like we wouldn't have you go hard, like just balls to the walls, pardon my French, all the time. We have you, okay, let's start, let's go a little harder, and let's have a recovery week. And we look at quarters the same time. Like an athlete would look at in season versus off season and doing something different. Do you, with peptides, as you're using them, do you cycle them?
Yeah, for sure. Depends on the one, but some you take 5 days a week and take the weekends off, and some you take them for, a high dose for a few days and do that once a month, and some of them you take for a few months and you take a break. So they're all a little bit different how you do those. But I'm experimenting with some different things and enjoying them and getting definitely the BPC 157. I've had amazing results with that and really like that a lot, especially for someone that is pulling muscles a lot or can't seem to address their leaky gut, or maybe they have leaky brain, if they have leaky gut. I think the BPC 157 is really great. You can't get it in the US so much, but you can in other countries. You can figure it out. Let's talk about testosterone, because I think there's, a lot of women out there that are, wanting to get strength and build muscle. And, what are your thoughts on taking testosterone and just hormone replacement in general to facilitate fitness?
ironically, years ago when I first started digging into this, testosterone is the natural place where we go for, building muscle. But for women, I mean, the bigger stimulus is estrogen. So, it's not that I would look at testosterone alone. I would suggest that for women, she may also want to look at her estrogen levels, because that's like you're sitting on this, three-legged stool and boom, we just took out estrogen. So if you can, you have to lift much harder. You've got to eat more protein. So we're getting the muscle protein synthesis from both of those things. And then if we're combining them on a regular basis, that's going to help. But not everybody can or wants to lift really heavy in order to get that stimulus. And so I think that's where it comes in, where you've got to look at estrogen and yes to testosterone. And here's where, we take in an intake form, and we do it very differently than the fitness industry traditionally has. We do everything. And so we're actually asking, what's your libido like? Because that's a huge factor for me. And if somebody's just saying my what, then we know potentially testosterone is a little bit lower, especially then if we go on and find out, how much strength training versus, what dose of cardio are you doing in your workout? And a lot of cardio will tend to, or a lot of endurance exercise will tend to kill testosterone. So you're not doing yourself any good. And, pandemic and post-pandemic, women in midlife tend to maybe like their wine a little bit too much, and so alcohol is not testosterone's friend, right? So you've got to think about that. And what do you want worse, right? So if you want, to decrease the belly fat, potentially you want to sleep a little bit better and you want to boost the testosterone to boost the libido, you're probably going to leave the alcohol alone, at least temporarily, until you get things under control. But absolutely. So in terms of exercise, how can you help yourself? If you looked at nothing else, you're going to do strength training, and high intensity interval training is also far better for you. And we're talking not just hit it, and do hit, but hit it and quit it. It should be short. If it's intense, you're walking away after a session of 15, 20 minutes at most. And that's it. You should feel good when you're done. And that's another thing that women have a hard time with. We tend to think we should have to wring ourselves out, and it's a good workout if we're sore while we walk out. It doesn't have to be. And, if you're taking yourself that far, you've probably just done a lot of extra muscle damage, and we maybe don't have the bandwidth to do that either energetically, or like you mentioned, we're more prone to risk of injury if we're pushing to those limits. We can push, we can go to the edge. We just don't need to go over it anymore.
I want to give thanks to one of our sponsors, Everbella Collagen, because as women age, collagen depletion becomes a major concern. It was for me, and especially with the hormonal shifts around menopause when our needs for collagen increases. So notable signs of collagen loss include wrinkles, fine lines, dryness, and loss of skin elasticity, that plumpness, brittle hair and nails, and stiff and painful joints. But when it comes to collagen supplements, there's not a lot of great options out there because many collagen supplements contain glyphosate and also heavy metals. They're contaminated with things like arsenic. So luckily, I found an incredible collagen supplement. It's free of toxic metals and it tastes like caramel. You can try it today for 30% off. Just go to everbella.com and use code Wendy30. Try today. I love this collagen supplement and highly, highly recommend it. Yeah. And how often do you think women should lift weights or do weight-bearing exercises? I mean, there isn't any shortcuts. You have to do it. If you want to be healthy and you want to maintain your balance and healthy bones and longevity, increase your lifespan, quality of life, feel good, look good, you have to do exercise. You have to do weight-bearing exercise, not just walking every day. You've got to do some weightlifting or something.
Yeah. So those are two different kinds, really weight bearing. So yes, walking and if you can, jumping, right? So if you're, not here with an injury or a joint replacement and your surgeon doesn't want you to mess up his pretty work, you could still do some jumping and hopping. And we're seeing post-menopausal women with osteoporosis now, studies are actually having them do heavier lifting, high intensity lifting, they're calling that, and high impact. Progressively, we don't start you there on day one, but slowly we're having you do box jumps, meaning you step onto it and jump down, like standing on your chair in the kitchen and jumping down, because the impact is far greater than something small like a jump rope repetitively. So weight bearing in all ways, but just being on your feet even more during the day, far better than if you're sitting down or on the couch, right? So all those things count. But let me answer your question about frequency of strength training, and I'll tell you how I answer that, and that it's slightly different. And I think we still have to come back to how do you feel. But I haven't even released this podcast yet, but it will potentially be out by the time we release this one. A 2023 study looked at best frequency and intensity. And of course, within that, in the study, there's always a limited, they're only looking at so much. So it was actually a study on subjects, not a review of literature. And they found that doing between 65 and 80% of a 1 rep max in terms of lifting and doing it 3 times a week was more effective than doing less frequent or even doing higher intensity. So to anybody who's like, what did she just say? That's 65 to 80%. That's about anywhere between 16 and 10 repetitions. And notoriously, 10 repetitions has been most closely associated with bone density benefits, more than 15, more than 20. So we're talking heavier. When you push on something, you push on bone, it pushes back, it responds. And that's really what we're talking about. So you can work your muscle by doing higher reps and lighter weight, or heavier and fewer repetitions. But you don't get the same exchange for bone. Bone actually requires more stimulus. If you can go heavy, you should. Now, not everybody can. So when you can, then you have to look at those other things. What else can I be doing? We've even seen, we talked about weight bearing. So notoriously, you and I think, okay, walking, stepping, picking up and putting down, because the earth and that impact is actually what helps grow the bone. But Dr. Lauren Fishman came out with a study in 2016 looking at 12 yoga poses, a minute each. So if it was right, left, it was 30 seconds here, 30 seconds there. And he did it in a longitudinal study, meaning over time with a large number of postmenopausal women. And over the 7 years of the study, women gained a % of bone mass every year, not just the first year, but every single year they continued to. And I had interviewed him last year, and he said, we're in the process of now breaking down to see were some of those more beneficial poses than others. They had put corpse pose in just as a reward for doing it. Now, I'm going to say that lying on the ground on your back probably isn't one of them that gave the most bone density, just as a guess. But, we're talking not hard things. We're talking tree pose, warrior pose. We're talking, rotated triangle, and some poses that someone might have said at one point, don't do that. Don't do forward flexion with rotation. In the 90s, that's why we were telling everybody. We were thinking, we need to bubble wrap you. You're diagnosed now. Don't move, right? And we're seeing the opposite. So if you're diagnosed, put down the fear, because it's a great time. We're seeing research studies do high impact, do heavyweight training progressively over like 18-month studies. So we don't take somebody and do that right away, but we build up. And we're seeing a low risk of injury, no dropout weight. Adherence is really good. And there's something that surprised researchers in these studies, and that is that the participants, the women, actually seemed to enjoy high intensity impact more. There was something about it, and it does light something up in your brain. It's like a sense of achievement and mastery. And when you finish a long walk and your legs sometimes feel heavy, just feel a little tired. You don't feel that way after high intensity exercise. It's a very different feel, and we should feel good. We need to start looking at that. So to summarize, that 3 times a week seemed to be better for bone density, and doing that moderate 10 to 16 repetitions. So here's what I do at Flipping 50. And we have to factor in that a lot of women come to me and they're already in some state of adrenal insufficiency. They're the women wanting help, not seeing results, and they're the push through people. And can we identify, right? We're all type A. You can count on me. I'm going to get it done. And if you say to do it, I'll do it. But they need actually to listen to their adrenals and not throw themselves under the bus, because they're not going to be increasing their bone density while they're exhausted. Something at some point is going to give, and they'll have total rest. So we actually have twice weekly total body strength training sessions, particularly for women in perimenopause who seem to be more volatile and up and down, so they can get it. They can stay consistent, stay regular. For postmenopausal women who generally, they're kind of flatlining, it's stabilized, it's lower, but it's predictable. Now they know their energy level, it's better. And we'll have them introduce, say, 2 heavy sessions, one on Monday, one on Friday, and do the third. But that would be the one that instead of 10 reps or fewer, they might go with the 16 repetitions and do single leg work. So it's a different kind of a stimulus, and we're not making you sore, tired, and achy while we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, when you were talking about the yoga and the yoga building up your bone mass, 1% a year, I can identify that because yoga kicks your butt. I mean, sometimes people or guys will look at yoga and be like, oh, it's not an exercise, but it's not easy, especially some of these classes are an hour and a half, or it's not easy, but it feels really good. It's very simple movement and stretching, and it's definitely muscle building. And I was doing yoga 4 times a week at one point. I was in the best shape of my life. I felt like an athlete. It's not easy.
No, it's not. And that's such a great point. And yet back to, sometimes hour and a half sessions, but this is 12 minutes, literally. It's like anybody with objections, we just tore them down. Okay. So just saying. But I think to your point, I interviewed Dr. Fishman and I said, look, I'm going to play devil's advocate, but never, ever would I have thought this counts as weight-bearing exercise. We're not picking up our feet and putting them down. So tell me what gives here, right? And he explained, originally we might have thought that hypothesis was true too, but what you're doing, say you're in a triangle pose, and for anybody unfamiliar with yoga, I know that's a stretch, but your spine is parallel to the floor while your legs are split apart in a forming a triangle. If you were to look at it, he said, what we're doing is we are weight bearing, and what we're doing is putting the effect of gravity on the spine differently. And so you are resisting the gravitational force. So in that, he redefined it, and numbers don't lie. The statistics don't lie. And there's a huge number. So, I think that's very exciting. If you can't lift heavy, or if you can't do high impact, you still have something. You still have other things you can do. And whole body vibration is another something to have in your back pocket that may work for you.
Yeah. Whole body vibration is amazing. How you're, it's adding another little factor, or you're vibrating your muscles, having to fight against that. Yeah, it's a great way to reduce the amount of time you're exercising and build bone density.
Right. It's a great insurance policy, right? Yes. So I'm at a point where I can still do high impact. I can still lift heavy, but, even I think, I love that you said earlier, like, I'm not going to get osteoporosis. Well, good luck with that. So, however, your gut may be in better shape than mine. So I've lifted heavy my whole life, done high impact, and I had osteopenia in my left arm. So I started using power plate for that reason. It's like, okay, what else can I do? I can't go heavier. I can't do it more days a week because my muscles, my endocrine system need recovery. We have to take the break. So how can you do it? But likewise, you've got a list of things that you can do, and what you have to focus on for anybody is what can I do, not what you can't.
Yeah. And I love PEMF also for building bone density. Amazing research there. And all you gotta do is lie there, on the PEMF mat and build your bones, but you still have to lift weights. You still have to do the weight bearing exercise and whatnot. But with
Yeah.
yoga, you're kind of like lifting your boobs. That's your weight. You're having to lift up your upper body and to hold poses, for a really long time. It's not easy. Your muscles
No.
are shaking and sometimes, with some poses.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a great functional workout. It's a great, if you're doing strength training that really helps with bone density most, many of those exercises are so linear. Well, life is not. So you go to yoga or you do it another way, but you've got rotation, flexion, extension, lateral flexion. It's all built in. I mean, there's no wonder it's 7,000 years old and it's still one of the best, right?
Oh, yeah, it's a tried and true. I want to give thanks to one of our sponsors, Pure Body Extra Zeolite. As you know, toxins are all around us and in the food that we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, and you can do something about it. With over 1 million bottles sold, Pure Body Extra Zeolite is changing lives with its natural detox. It's a nanonized zeolite that's proven pure and optimized to remove the toxins that have been building up in your body. And just a few simple taste-free sprays a day, and you can detox every single day. Get your bottle at thegoodinside.com. And let's talk about another peptide, because we kind of segued into this when we were talking about peptides. But Ozempic is something that a lot of women are turning to. A lot of celebrities are talking about, piquing the interest of millions of people, tempting them to use Ozempic for weight loss. And I get it. I've tried it. I wanted to try it. I wanted to see what the hype was about. And it is amazing. It stops your cravings. You lose weight, but you can't stay on it long term. You cannot. It has its host of issues. But do you want to talk a little about Ozempic and what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah. And I'd love for you to come back in with that too. But I think, it's interesting. In the last week, I've gone like 360 degrees and I'm kind of back to, hopefully I'm not spinning anymore, but my jury is still out on this. I mean, number one, I think I was still always coming from a point where for the right individual, it could be the right thing. It's that individual that we all know them. They've done all the things. They've made all the lifestyle choices and changes. They are lifting. They are monitoring blood sugar levels. They are changing diet. They're getting the protein and they're not getting anywhere. And their weight is a health risk in itself. And there are other numbers, inflammation and blood sugar, fasting blood sugar levels. Those are also problematic and threats for them. I think for those people under the right supervision, it's right. What I don't like is for, celebs, or the real housewives who are wanting to go from a size 4 to a size 2, not do the work, not make the lifestyle changes, simply not be bothered by that, and harming themselves because as they lose, they're probably barely eating and they're losing lean muscle mass, and over time, that's going to come back to bite you. So if you're doing this for metabolic reasons, the hope is that somebody's counseling you, you're doing the strength training, you're being sure that you're forward first with protein so you're getting adequate stimulus for the muscles naturally and that you're not losing muscle mass. So you're also tracking, getting on a smart scale, tracking your body composition, not just body fat, but looking at your absolute pounds of lean skeletal muscle. How much is there? Don't lose it. We don't ever want to lose that real estate here. But recently, I kind of heard of some women using it who already are fairly lean, to get that extra edge, and that kind of put me up in arms. I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm looking all differently at my Instagram account. And like, who don't I trust right now that has looked really good over the last year? And I had no clue because I'm so naive that they might be getting a little leg up. And then 2 days later, I was introduced to someone who said to me, well, I'm doing it just for the longevity benefits. And I'm doing such a low dose, I'm micro dosing and I'm cycling it and I'm doing it only once a month. So, all those people that I respect. And so my jury is still out. There's, I think, a lot of things to consider. It's always, for me, a risk-reward ratio. If we were talking solely about exercise, we might say deadlifts are wonderful, push-ups are great. And yet, like, is there a risk associated with that and with both of those? By coincidence, there certainly is. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. It's a question. But again, bottom line, it's not a way to skip the things that you need to be doing. And to your point, you can't not lift the weights, even if you're doing some other things, because we lift weights every day. Putting dishes away in the cupboard, taking your carry-on, and putting it in the overhead bin by yourself. It's either that or bat your eyelashes, right? You're going to have to do one or the other. So it's, which part do you want to play? But we are always lifting. You're going to bend over and reach into a bassinet, or you're going to pick up the dog or the salt pellets or the dog food. We're going to have those instances where we do need a lift. We need that function.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that's a very, very good way to put it, that you're kind of, the jury is out and you're still kind of like, I think that you're still kind of like, yes, and maybe no. But I think there's, the Ozempic has been used since 2017. And before that, it was a peptide that people were using. It's, my rule is I don't touch anything unless it's been used in the general population for 5 years. I don't touch it. I want to see what's going on. And I think having tried it myself, unbelievable at controlling your blood sugar, and controlling your cravings. And I found myself just craving sugar and food all the time. Like I just couldn't control my snacking, and, certainly related to cortisol. But, I think for a lot of people that have diabetes and blood sugar control issue, it is almost like a miracle drug for those people. But I do have concerns about people starting to take it and seeing these amazing results and stopping their cravings and snacking and then not wanting to get off of it.
Yes, I see that too. And there's another problem or challenge that I want to have us bring up, and that is, I've got clients or women in our community who actually struggle to get adequate calories in, adequate protein in, because they've got what I would call early satiety. Sitting down at a meal with other people, they'll look around them and say, how can you eat all that? And so they're already not getting it, or already very disciplined and may have cravings, but they don't give in to them. Now we're taking someone who's potentially prone to losing muscle because they're not already eating enough. We're closing down their appetite even more, so they're eating less. And I, just to one case study, I had a client who deserves to have rewards. She works harder than anyone else. She's playing by all the rules. If anything, her hardest thing is getting enough in. But she lost muscle, not a lot. But when you're 70, right, any is a lot because it's harder to get that real estate back. And likewise, I walked into my stylist, and I know that he, in this case, had been on Ozempic since September, I think. And each time I'd gone back, he looked better. And I walked in this time and I said, wow. I said, you look great. I said, so what are you doing? And he said, I'm never going off of it, right? Yeah. Because it's a crutch.
Yeah, because when you do go off it, you want to eat again. You want to eat everything inside. The cravings come right back. And the blood sugar issues potentially that I think a lot of women in menopause start dealing with for various reasons. Toxins is one of them. Stress is one of them.
Yes.
Circadian rhythm control is one of them. And just the biology wearing out, to a certain degree. And so it is, it can definitely become a crutch. And, how does it work? It slows down your digestion. And that can cause problems, constipation, the food rotting in your gut, getting sulfuric burps. I had that, these sulfuric kind of rotten egg burps, because the food is literally rotting in your digestive system.
Oh,
Seriously, it is. That's what it's doing. It's slowing
yeah.
down your digestion. And for some people that it's a problem.
The point you bring up about constipation, and slowing it down, that gives me fear for a lot of women in our community. And many women tolerate constipation on a regular basis. This is all pre-Ozempic, pre this conversation. They just tolerate it and think, well, that's my normal, or that's the way I've always been, and not realizing, oh no, we can do things about this. We can make some lifestyle changes, and we've got to get rid of toxins. That's part of the way we're going to do it. And, so that really bothers me for a lot of women who already may tend to struggle with that.
It's there, and other issues. But yeah, we won't get into all that, but there's, you guys can read articles about those things. But, any other thoughts on Ozempic?
I think it's just out there. I think have the discussion and realize that it's not just, one size fits all, that there are functional docs that are willing to microdose, that are willing to start you at a very low dose and increase it, or to cycle it. And if you were going to do it, I would suggest that's the first place that you'd want to start, and look at what else is there. Are you doing the right lifestyle activities? And is there any emotional eating in your history? Because it's not going to make that go away because you're on it. And from some that I've heard, the emotional eating may still be triggered. And if that happens while you're on it, it can cause more complication, more nauseousness, more getting sick. So there's a lot to really consider. And yet, I think if you're looking longevity-wise, can this be helpful? Be very honest with yourself, because I think we're all sucked into the immediate gratification, and it's maybe the weight loss that sounds sexy.
Yeah. And for sure, the Ozempic does not, I can speak to this firsthand, it does not help you overcome emotional eating or stress eating. So it doesn't work on those. For sure, if that's the root of your issues, that's another thing you have to address. But Debra, thanks so much for coming on the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, how to work with you, your podcast, your website, etc.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It was a great discussion. Flipping50.com is where everybody can find me. That's all words spelled out, no spaces. Flipping50 TV. Flipping50 TV is where I am on social. So primarily I'm on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube. Lots of resources for you there, lots of quick tips, messages. And the Flipping50 podcast, which you have been on, and fantastic episode, by the way, that we did together. So lots of things that if you're interested in muscle, more on strength training, more talk about muscle protein synthesis, or how do you get that osteoporosis, all the things that women in midlife are concerned about. Great resources for you there. But at the site, you'll find kind of what's happening this month. Lots of free master classes for you to dip your toe in the water.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Debra, thanks so much for coming on the show. And everyone, I'm Dr. Wendy Myers. Thanks for tuning in every week to the Myers Detox podcast. It's such a pleasure to do this show every week. And it's so much enjoy. It's learning myself, but more important, teaching you guys and helping you guys, get that information you need to take your health to the next level. And it's such a pleasure and honor to be able to help you in that way. So thanks for tuning in every week.
The Myers Detox Podcast is created and hosted by Wendy Myers. This podcast is for information purposes only. Statements and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Wendy Myers and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.